Hello?
Hello,
Hello, Dave. Is that you?
that's me.
Hi.
Hello.
We're live and we're back here with the Center Radio. How are you doing today?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Having some technical difficulties today, but we're getting it together. Just wondering what you're up and about to today. Are you hearing any reaction as far as, first of all, the governor's declaration that he's going to be reopening, or at least has a plan for reopening here that was published, I guess, on Monday. Did you hear anything about that?
You mean a reaction locally to the governor's reopening thought? Yeah. Yes. I took a stroll around town in the downtown business district to sort of gauge what citizens, business owners, business managers thought about it. And I would have to say they're conflicted. It's a pretty small sample. I can't say that it's representative of the whole business community, but of the 3 or 4 businesses that I did chat with, I would say that it's on the one hand and on the other hand kind of issue for them. They're concerned, obviously, about their income and their livelihoods, but at the same time, I think everyone's grasping that if you decide for yourself, you may be putting others at risk, which is not necessarily a good business model.
All right. So the Hawkeye, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been tracking as far as the COVID-19 with the Hawkeye? And can you tell us, basically what you're finding out about that since the last time we talked last week?
What we talked about last time was what now?
The about the diary as far as the COVID-19 that's been
sure.
published in the Hawkeye.
Right. So the coronavirus diary is just personal reporting and reflections on how it's, I don't know, the biggest story of my lifetime is affecting my town. And I want to make sure that citizens of Indiana County get a different perspective, and the Hawkeye tries to provide a little bit different perspective. So what you're showing on the screen now is a case involving a conflict about communication in Indiana County. The first death in Indiana County from the COVID-19 virus was last week, and Indiana County Commissioner posted news of the death on her social media page, and the coroner of Indiana County took offense and reproached her for stepping out of line and reporting what she knew to be fairly reliable information, which was from our former guest here today, Tom Stutzman, pretty reliable source of information. The emergency management director was the source of the one death in Indiana County. It turns out that the Indiana County Commissioner Shireen Hess's report was not only accurate, it was understated. There were 2 people who died, and by the end of the week, it was 4. To my way of thinking, that's information that citizens should know pretty darn quick and not have to filter it through a lot of different bureaucrats and officials. I think it's information that's life or death, and I think citizens might be concerned to know that information. Not least the people whose relatives are in the nursing homes in Indiana County, and it's appearing that all 4 deaths recorded in Indiana County so far have occurred at nursing homes, and that would be 2 nursing homes. We don't know the names of those nursing homes, although I think that might be interesting to know. We do know that half of the deaths in Pennsylvania occurred at nursing homes or long-term care facilities. So that information is, to my way of thinking, fairly important to know sooner rather than later. And I think it was interesting for readers to know about this little dust up between the coroner and the county commissioner. So that was one of the things we're talking about. The theme here is communications. And as Gerald Smith was asking Tom Stutzman in an earlier segment here on the program, what is the flow of information from Indiana County officials to Indiana County citizens? And again, I think that's information that's pretty important to know. If you compare Indiana County to other jurisdictions, like, for example, the state, the governor is not doing briefings every day, I don't think, but he's doing them pretty darn near. Other localities in other states have provided briefings to citizens from their governors and other elected officials. And that seems to be making the people who are receiving that information pretty happy. Based on the polling that's been done, governors and mayors who are conducting these briefings are pretty darn popular, way more popular than the President of the United States, whose briefings tend to be filled with information that ranges from untrue to nonsense. And his numbers, at least so far as polls are concerned, are well below 50%. Governors are up above 75% now, and other people who give briefings on a regular basis are also notching pretty high poll numbers for what that's worth. So by comparison, Indiana County has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to letting people know what's going on. So what's going on in nursing homes, the fact that nursing homes regulate themselves in the state of Pennsylvania should give pause to anybody who is concerned about the occupants and residents and nursing cares, not to mention the people who work in those nursing homes and long-term care facilities. So that's another issue that we'll be interested in following.
And along those lines, what's your latest update and assessment of how our community is reacting to the pandemic, just in general? We've been locked away now for almost 2 months, at least 7 or 8 weeks. We, like we were saying before, the businesses are starting to get a little bit, edgy. Kids have been out of school. So how do you think, or what are you finding out basically, how our county is reacting to the pandemic?
Well, again, my personal reporting is based on pretty small samples, but the sense I'm getting walking around town is that it's the scariest thing I've seen. I'm a pretty old man, and I've not seen anything like this in any of the places I've lived before. And I would say that based on the conversations I've had, where people are following what's going on, they're just unsure. And they're not sure whether to react or to hole up at home and hunker down. As you allude to, I think a lot of people are recognizing that if something doesn't happen soon, then the fear and anxiety that comes from lack of income and livelihood is going to manifest itself in some pretty dire ways. We've already seen some rallies at state capitals. I think there was one in Harrisburg yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And there you have on the one hand, some people are really concerned about being told by their government that they need to stay in order to not only protect themselves and their families, but the rest of us as well. And on the other hand, it's those who recognize that the scientists say that you better protect yourself and others by staying at home until the all clear. Now, even if we're talking about loosening up from this first wave, as Tom Stutzman has said in some of the conversations he's had in recent weeks, this is just the first wave. So what we're seeing now might last 4 to 6 weeks. What are we in now? 4 or 5 weeks now. So with any luck, we'll be opening up a little bit on May the 8th. But don't count your chickens before they're hatched, because there's at least 2 or 3 more waves that, according to the Indiana County Pandemic Emergency Plan, tell us are coming along clickety-clack right down the track straight behind them. So, and there's no evidence to support the idea that the coronavirus will fade during warm weather, because we've seen in India that that's not the case. we've seen that in other warm weather climates in Southeast Asia, that's not necessarily the case. So I think if citizens are a little bit antsy about getting out and getting back to normal, I think they better think twice. And I think county officials recognize that. I wish they made it a little bit more clear.
You alluded to some of the protests that the citizens, I guess, in Harrisburg and other states have been engaged in. Are you finding any people here in town that are to the point that they're ready to protest or have been talking about protesting or anything of that nature?
None that I've spoken with personally, Sybil, but I have been following social media a little bit. I'm not much of a social media hound, but I recognize the value that social media provide when it comes to dispensing information and gathering information as a journalist. And what I have seen on local Facebook posts suggests that some shop owners, some business people are interested in opening their stores no matter what the governor's orders are, and just take their chances, not only with the virus, but also with the enforcement mechanisms, whatever they may be, if they violate the governor's orders. So I have read on social media some suggestions that some people, probably associated with some of the groups we saw rallying in Harrisburg on Monday, are willing to open their doors for business. And those businesses would be non-essential businesses, which raises the prospect of enforcement and whether you want to make a martyr out of someone like that, or whether it's necessary to do so. So I've heard some, but I can't say that it's a representative.
Wonderful. Finally, can you tell me what else you're following right now at this point in the middle of the COVID-19 restriction?
Well, as it relates to COVID-19, yes, I was interested in the story that was published in the Indiana Gazette last week. And Mr. Stutzman and Gerald Smith were talking about it earlier in the program, about the testing that is scheduled to, or that has apparently already begun this week, involving Indiana University of Pennsylvania and Indiana Regional Medical Center, to start a form of testing that will shorten the time for turnaround of results from those tests. Now, everything that I've read about testing is that it is the key. And if you're going to base your reopening of society on science, then it's the testing results and the contact tracing that'll tell you whether the time is now or the time is later. So the testing that is being discussed at IRMC and with IUP involved in it raises a few questions that would include, what about the supplies? So one of the holdups and hangups with the tests that have been done before, according to my reading, is that you may have a great test, but if you don't have the swabs or the reagents, as they're called, which are the things that take the sample, and the transport media, which allows you to put the sample in some sort of container and take it to the lab, if you don't have those things, then your testing is not going to be worth much. And the turnaround time is just going to be as long as it was. So the turnaround time here before this test was discussed was a week and a half, as long as a week and a half. Now it's down to half that, maybe, so we're told. But the question about supplies is just one question that might be important to know about this arrangement between IUP and the hospital. So that's one story that we'll be working on as well.
Wonderful. I look forward to reading, what you find out about that. That'll be interesting. I know there's some debate too about the type of testing. Do we need, actual positive test, or is it the antibody test as far as reopening is concerned? And I'd really be interested to know what you find out. I think we're going to have the head of RMC, Wolf, back on next week, or perhaps next week. Hopefully we'll have him to kind of talk about, what's going on with that, to kind of help us, reopen, but making sure that we're basing everything on science and, information from health officials. So thank you so much. You always give us insight into what's actually going on in Indiana since we're all locked, since we're all in lockdown and we can't get out. We thank you so much for all your reporting, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Take care.